We're going to just go ahead and jump right in. But first, a little disclaimer, just that this presentation should not be considered legal advice or representative of any sort of policy position. Okay, so for the first part of the webinar, I'm going to review what our office is. I usually go into these assuming that most people don't know what the Commissioner of Financial Regulation does in the state of Maryland. And then I'm going to review different types of consumer loans and debt and go over some of your consumer rights as Marylanders and the additional COVID-19 financial relief that is available, as Sue mentioned. When we originally scheduled this, I had kind of expected Congress to pass additional relief, and that has not happened yet. So some of this may be a review, but nonetheless, it's all very important. And if some isn't relevant to you or your situation, it could be relevant to somebody in your family, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. So if you learn anything new, I'd encourage you to pass it on and talk to others to make sure that they know that there's some potential relief out there for them. So as you mentioned, I'm with the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. We are a separate division within the Department of Labor. Our office supervises those individuals and businesses that provide financial services to Maryland consumers. And as part of that, we conduct examinations, which are basically like audits of these businesses' books to make sure that they're following state and federal law and that their financials are safe and sound. We also take consumer complaints, and this is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a second. So if there's a business that we regulate that a Maryland resident is having a problem with, they can report it to us. And if the issue cannot be resolved or we identify some sort of violation of state or federal law, then we can undertake some sort of enforcement action, which could be, it's a range of possibilities, cease and desist orders, civil fines, and or just restitution back to any consumers that may have been harmed. So examples of the businesses and individuals that we supervise, state chartered banks and credit unions. So these are the more local banks and credit unions. The national banks and credit unions fall under federal supervision, not state. So an example that's federal would be Bank of America, right? Or any sort of credit union that has FCU after its name, that stands for Federal Credit Union. Mortgage lenders, servicers, brokers, so this refers to mortgage companies and your mortgage broker. And then consumer lenders, installment lenders, these are the loan companies that provide more like unsecured credit if you want to go get a personal loan, or if you're financing, certain types of companies that finance automobiles. Check cashers and money transmission. So money transmission includes some of the electronic money wiring. Debt collectors, credit reporting agencies, that does include the big three that many people have heard of, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And debt management and credit services businesses, that primarily refers to those companies that you may call if you need help working through some debt or you would like assistance from a third party repairing credit. We also have a student loan ombudsman that works directly under the commissioner, and this person is a dedicated resource for Marylanders that are having issues with their student loan company. So it's important that if you encounter any sort of illegal, fraudulent, or otherwise what you perceive to be a deceptive business practice from any of the companies that we regulate, that you report it to us. This helps us keep track of what's going on in the industry and also helps us enforce the consumer protection laws. We have a special unit that investigates in response to complaints, and that will be, that will investigate complaints against businesses that we regulate, as well as businesses that, you may believe should be regulated, right? So if you're dealing with a credit repair company, for instance, and they do not have a license or are not registered with our office, that can be reported to us. And that way we can make sure, again, that every company that should be regulated by us is under our supervision. I will also, near the end of the presentation, do a little demonstration of our website. I will show you where you can submit a complaint form. And this just talks about a little bit more of the complaint process. It's a little bit of a back and forth. Please be aware that when you submit a complaint, we will send it to the entity you're complaining about for their written response. And then we have a trained examiner to look at the information, determine if we need more deeper response from the company. And then, as mentioned earlier, we'll refer to enforcement if we think a violation has occurred. Okay, so now I'm going to jump right into the meat of the presentation and why you probably signed on. So I'm going to go through each different type of consumer loan or debt that our office has supervision over, and talk a little bit about what maybe some of the protections are and how to get more information. So first would be mortgages, right? I think, a lot of us are familiar with the CARES Act by now. It was passed in March from Congress. That includes some mortgage relief for those borrowers that have, quote, federally backed loans. So that means a loan that is owned by the companies Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not loan originators. They are not lenders. They are companies that sort of back the financial security of your loan. And then there's FHA, VA, and USDA. So when you took out your loan, it was FHA is the Federal Housing Administration, VA, Veterans, and USDA, the Rural Development. If you got a loan with assistance through any of these federal agencies, then your mortgage would also fall under this sort of protection. You could be eligible for forbearance, plus an additional extension, so forbearance for 6 months, and then after that 6 months, you can call the mortgage company and say, hey, I'm still having trouble, or I expect to still have trouble. I'd like to extend the forbearance. It's important to keep in mind that forbearance is basically a pause. You will still owe the money at some point, and that can either be when the forbearance period is over or at the back end of the loan. Those sorts of details, it's important that you ask the representative from your mortgage company when you talk to them what the exact terms of your forbearance agreement will be. Another point is that, of course, the property must be residential. This doesn't apply to commercial loans. However, it doesn't have to be owner-occupied. So landlords may also apply for some sort of mortgage relief or forbearance if they have a single or multifamily property. Okay, so question I get a lot is, what if my mortgage doesn't qualify for the CARES Act relief? More than half of the mortgages in the U.S. do. I've seen estimates from 55 to 70%, depending on who the data source is. So keep in mind, most of the mortgages that I'm talking about will qualify for the CARES Act. However, some don't. Our office has been in touch with the banks and credit unions that we regulate, as well as some other lenders and other mortgage companies, and they are also providing their own forbearance programs, including, deferring payment until later, waiving late fees. Some may also be refraining from reporting negative information to the credit bureaus. The important part is here that you really should reach out to your mortgage servicer directly. So I'm going to pause for a second and try to define a mortgage servicer. A loan servicer is the company that you send your monthly payments to. So they're the ones that collect your payments, with respect to mortgages, they will allocate some to the escrow. They'll hold the escrow. They are responsible for sort of that day-to-day, month-to-month administration of your loan and your loan payments. This may or may not be the company that you originally took out your loan with. That's another important thing to remember. However, if you want to talk about forbearance, this is a company that you need to get in contact with. So you can find their contact information on your monthly statement. If you get electronic statements or you've lost your statement, you can also look them up online. The Maryland Bankers Association and the Maryland Credit Union Association have some direct links on their website to the different banks and credit unions that are doing business in the state. I'm going to take a sec and show that to you. So here's the website for the Maryland Bankers Association, and it's the COVID-19 relief page, and you just scroll down, and you see they have a list of all the banks that are do business in Maryland and are members of this association. And it's not just local banks. You see here Bank of America, M&T. So these links basically just take you right to the COVID-19 page for that particular bank or lender. And it's the same thing for the DC Credit Union Association. You know, if you can't get to these links after the webinar, you can just simply Google Maryland Bankers Association COVID-19 and Credit Union Association COVID-19, and you should be able to find these pages. But again, you scroll down, and then you've got direct links to all the credit unions. If your loan is not serviced by a bank or credit union and it's a company, then you can use something that's called the NMLS Consumer Access. Now, NMLS stands for Nationwide Multi-State Licensing System. And you can read more about it here, but it's a national portal that for state regulatory agencies like us, this is how a consumer can find out if their mortgage lender is licensed and their contact information. So I'm just going to take a second to demonstrate this real quick, because this website can be useful for more than just looking up mortgage lenders. So for example, let's say PHH is your mortgage servicer. You would type it in there, click search. Let's see, let's try this again. Search. Okay. And then it takes you to kind of the terms and agreement section. I do encourage you to read that, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go right through this. See the CAPTCHA so they know you're not a robot. And voila. So you see there's a lot. There's PHH. These are individuals that represent PHH, so they may be brokers or originators. If you want to narrow down your search, you can select company, go down here where it says any regulator, and we're not looking for federal, we're looking for Maryland. Apply the filter, and then it narrows it down to 2. And this is the one that I was looking for, PHH. So then you can click on that, and it brings up more information about the company. Okay, so phone number, all the different websites, the contact information, email address. Notice that this says licensing, so this may not be the best for consumer complaints. Nonetheless, it's an email address. You can see all the different trade names that this company has done business under, and then you scroll down, and then this is a list of all the states that license PHH Mortgage Company. So let's see, and the type of license that they have, and then there you go. There's Maryland. All right, they are licensed under us. They have a mortgage lender license. Okay, these links will take you directly to our office's website, but I'm going to click this little plus sign because I want to know more, and then I can see that their license is renewed through 2020. It was approved. Other trade names that they use in Maryland, and the history, and that they are authorized to conduct business. So again, this is just a really great way to double check that lender is licensed, and to get their contact information or their website or phone number. Okay. Jump right back in here. Okay, moving on. So student loans. Student borrowers have a number of federal and state protections, and in particular in Maryland, laws were recently passed that provided additional protections for Maryland student loan borrowers. So, for example, a student loan servicer, and again, the loan servicer is the company that you send your monthly payments to. They are prohibited from engaging in any sort of deceptive, misleading practices regarding the collection of your payments or other activity. And as a borrower, you have the right to request information and get a written response. These are rights that are not unique to COVID-19. So these existed prior to the pandemic and are separate. During this time, however, be real careful about fraudulent companies that are posing as government agencies or your loan servicer offering relief. Make sure that you only communicate directly with your student loan servicer about any sort of repayment options. So related to COVID-19, the U.S. Department of Education, from an executive order from the president, extended temporary forbearance, which is just like the mortgage forbearance. This means a pause in your payments. You will still owe them. And 0% interest for most federal student loans until the end of the year. For more information, again, contact your loan servicer. Keep in mind that for many federal student loans, you were placed into automatic forbearance with the 0% interest. If you want to keep paying your loans at the 0% interest, if you can afford to, you need to call your loan servicer or go on their website and opt out. And if you have any issues with your student loan servicer, we have the Student Loan Ombudsman. That's what he's in our office for, to help you work through any of these problems, or if you have questions about your repayment plans. And I'll have his contact information at the end of the webinar. Okay, next I'm moving on to, you go back for just a second. 2 other points. One, if you are taking the forbearance, the student loan servicer should be reporting your payment status as current. If you were current before you took the forbearance, they need to still be reporting your payment status as current. And then the other point, if you have a private student loan, so if your student loan is not through the U.S. Department of Education, the CARES Act protections don't apply to you. However, these loan companies are still willing to work with their borrowers. You just need to contact them directly. Okay, so personal loans are unsecured loans that people may take out. They're usually smaller dollar, short term, and can be higher interest. Quote, payday loans fall under this category, but they're not just payday loans. And these days, most people are getting their personal loans through online lenders, sometimes referred to as fintech. That word is basically financial technology just crammed together. So be really careful for these sorts of loans, especially if you're dealing with online lenders. Watch out for scams before you enter into agreement. Check them on the NMLS, that website that I just showed you. So like I said, that's not just for mortgage companies. You can also look up personal loan companies. So one that I've seen advertised a lot is Upstart. So here it is. And you can see again, there's the contact information, the phone number. Before you go into any sort of loan agreement with any non-bank lender, especially one that you find online, please, please, please go to this website and check to make sure they are licensed with the state of Maryland. And you see Upstart. as an installment loan license. So they have to follow the laws that were created for installment lenders. And you can see all the same information. They're renewed through the end of the year, and their status is approved. Okay. So for COVID-19 relief, there's not anything specific for personal and installment loans, but again, don't be afraid to reach out. So if you're at risk of defaulting, you may be eligible for some sort of deferral program, fee waiver. Don't be afraid to ask for these things too. If you do get on a deferral program, ask them if they will hold off on reporting negative information to the credit bureaus, or if they will give you some sort of late fee waiver if you were already behind. Okay. So auto loans and title loans. We've heard of auto loans are the ones that are used for financing, like the purchase of a car or truck. Vehicle title loans borrow against the value of the car or truck using the title. But in the end, the automobile is used as collateral. So if there's non-payment, the automobile can be taken back or repossessed. So particularly with title loans, watch out for scams. Know who you're borrowing with. Before you get into a loan agreement, look them up on that website that I just showed you to make sure they are licensed and in good standing. Title loans have to, even though it's sort of a different process because you're using your vehicle title, they still have to follow the same laws that other installment and consumer lenders have to follow in the state of Maryland. So particular to COVID-19 relief, Governor Hogan issued an executive order back in April that prohibited certain types of repossessions of cars and trucks, in addition to mobile homes and liveaboard boats, until further notice or the state of emergency is lifted. So even if you have fallen behind on your payment and the lender is not willing to work with you, they are prohibited from this type of repossession. So you should still have use of your car or truck. And that's particularly relevant for people that have mobile homes. Okay. Moving along. All right. So collections and garnishment. During a time of economic stress, it is not unusual for scammers to come out of the woodwork, and especially in the area of debt collection. There will be folks saying that you owe debt that is not real. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as phantom debt. If a debt collector contacts you, they have to tell you the name of the creditor, like who originally had the debt, and you can ask the debt collector to show you verification of the debt and the amount owed. Once again, debt collectors licensed by our office, you should be able to find a debt collection agency on the NMLS system, that website that I was just showing you. You would search it the same way that you would search the personal lender or the mortgage lender. Check to make sure they're licensed and currently licensed before you start paying them money. Okay, so for COVID-19, I think that some folks were hesitant to contact their collection agency, and while there is, again, no specific law, kind of like the consumer lenders, there's no specific law calling out or requiring collection agencies to work with people that are experiencing some COVID-19 related hardship. You can still call them and ask for revision on your repayment agreement. Don't be afraid to reach out. I think that a lot of people think that once a debt is in collection and they've worked out an agreement, then that's it. They can't call and they can't try to change it. Because the collection agency, in the end, wants to, recover some of the funds. So it's in everyone's best interest to try to work something out. Governor Hogan, back in April, signed an executive order that prohibited collection agencies from garnishing your economic impact payments. So the economic impact payments, those were the payments that you that you may have received back in like early summer, late spring. I can't remember exactly when now, but the payments from the IRS, they were either direct deposited or you received a debit card or a check in the mail. Election agencies are not allowed to garnish these payments, with the exception of for child support. They're also, banks are not allowed to garnish the economic impact payments for set-off. So that means if you owed, let's say, Bank of America money on an old debt, and your payment was deposited into your Bank of America checking account, Bank of America can't pull that money and say, well, you owe this to me already. The economic impact payments are special and they're supposed to be preserved. Collection and garnishment for federal student loans are suspended until the end of the year. So this was part of the COVID-19 relief protections that I was talking about a couple of slides ago for the student loans. So while federal student loans qualify for forbearance and 0% interest, they're also not allowed, student loan servicing companies and the U.S. Department of Education is not allowed to undergo any sort of collection activities or garnishment related to student loans. Okay, so debt relief and credit repair. So I think your first step, if you're having issues, and this has been a common theme throughout this webinar, is to contact your lender, your servicer, your collection agency. Contact them directly if you're experiencing difficulty. A lot of them have what's referred to as loss mitigation options. That means some sort of alternative to just defaulting on the debt. And you may be able to work out a new repayment plan or modify the terms of the loan, which means changing the interest rate, making the payback period longer in order to spread out payments and make the monthly payments slower. If you do choose to to use a third-party credit repair, debt management, or other debt relief service, there are laws governing the way that these businesses work. There are both federal and state laws. And you can search for a business again on that NMLS, Nationwide Multi-State Licensing System website that I demonstrated earlier. That's especially important for the credit services businesses or the credit repair businesses. There's a lot of scam companies out there. So before you sign an agreement, make sure you understand what you're getting into and that the business is licensed in the state. And the reason it's important to make sure that the business is licensed in the state of Maryland is not only to confirm their legitimacy, but if they are licensed and down the road you have problems with them, you know that you can come to our office and file a complaint that, we regulate that entity, which means that they have to answer to us. So related to COVID-19, this isn't specific to kind of the debt relief credit repair services, but if you're concerned about your credit, the three main credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, are offering free weekly online reports through April. The credit bureaus, these are the companies that lenders and creditors send your payment information to. They are not the ones that create your credit score. These are the ones that are basically, they hold the information. So it's got your payment history for loans, if you've ever had any bankruptcy or foreclosure or other legal action against you for any sort of, lack of payment or collection. These three companies receive that information from the creditors, and then if another lender wants to know what your payment history has been like, they contact one of these companies for that information. Each company kind of does things a little bit differently. So I think it's always, when I check my credit reports, I always pull all three, especially now since you can get it for free weekly through September. When this ends, when April, or free weekly through April, my apologies. When April ends, you're still entitled to free credit report annually. So and you can get them all through this annualcreditreport.com. You can go through each company's website directly, or you can go to annualcreditreport.com and get all three of them at once. Make sure you either go directly through the agencies, through the credit bureaus themselves, or use this website, which is authorized by federal law. The reason is that you're going to be, in order to prove you are who you say you are before you can get your credit report, you're going to be inputting a lot of personal information, and you want to make sure that you're giving that information to a legitimate company. So, if you want to monitor your credit even if you're not experiencing any sort of payment difficulties, in order to make sure that somebody didn't take out a loan in your name, or if there hasn't been any sort of identity theft, you can click that button and start working through the process to request your free report. Okay. So that's the sort of high-level view of the different types of companies that our agency regulates, some of the specific COVID-19 relief information for each type of loan or debt, and not just about COVID-19, but also your rights as a consumer, how to look them up online to make sure the company or the business is licensed or registered in the state of Maryland. If you need direct help, so if you need assistance trying to work through foreclosure or other housing, or you need representation by an attorney related to housing matters, call the Maryland Hope Hotline. It's 1-877-462-7555. This hotline is managed by the Maryland Department of Housing. It's a referral hotline, so you call, you talk to the operator, you tell them what's going on and generally where you are, and they will refer you to a more local agency. For help with other shelter-related, like if you need emergency shelter, if you need help trying to figure out where to access food banks, or get on supplemental nutrition assistance program, if you need some help with mental health, if you're experiencing any sort of family issues, in particular domestic violence, or even other legal issues, call 211. They're handling a lot of calls right now, but they're, again, state managed and state sanctioned, and they can refer you to a local agency or point you in the right direction. Additionally, our office has published a COVID-19 financial relief guide. And since we have a couple minutes, I'm going to show that to you real quick. So you would go to our office's website. So go to the Maryland Department of Labor, labor.maryland.gov, and then click on Financial. Okay, and that brings you to our office's website. And then you can click here for much of the information that I've shared, and even into a little bit more detail: student loans, mortgages, fraud, avoiding fraud. There's some answers to FAQs here. Will my credit be impacted if I apply for unemployment? So it covers more information than I've covered here. The financial relief guide, you can click on that, and that will bring you to this PDF. So the relief guide is a PDF, but it's all of these links. Anything in blue is clickable, and it covers a bit more than what I discussed in this webinar. It covers things like insurance, utility. Now, these businesses are not regulated by our office. So for example, click on that. That'll bring you to the mortgage payment and foreclosure section. And one thing that I didn't mention in the mortgage section of the webinar is foreclosures. So foreclosures, cannot be started. The governor issued an executive order back in April that said that residential foreclosures cannot be initiated. Now, the courts are open, so any foreclosures that were already in process prior to this executive order can now start moving through the pipeline. But lenders and mortgage companies cannot start the foreclosure process by sending you a notice of intent. So there's also other information on here too. Like if you're not sure whether your mortgage is considered federally backed, or if it has, if you're not sure if Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac own your loan, you can click here and that will take you to a loan lookup tool. You can put in your information and see if one of those agencies owns your loan. And then let's see. So you can use the table of contents to kind of click around information about credit reporting, some tax information, some information about where to go for resources. There's the HOPE hotline that I just gave you. And then this is the part that I wanted to cover. So all of the businesses that are covered in this PDF guide are regulated by some sort of agency. So whether it's our office, the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, who regulates all of these sorts of businesses, or perhaps the Insurance Administration, who regulates insurance companies, or the Public Service Commission, who regulates utility companies, you can always contact any of these state agencies for assistance with with the business that's regulated. You can also contact the Office of the Attorney General. The Consumer Protection Division will handle general consumer complaints, particularly landlord-tenant issues, and instances of price gouging. So if you believe a store is unfairly charging a high price for a good during an emergency, you would report it to the Attorney General's office. For those businesses that are regulated federally, so the national banks, federal credit unions, you would report it to these federal agencies. Scams and wireless phones, these agencies, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a great catch-all. I also have them listed up here on the webinar slides for good reason. So the CFPB page, now keep in mind the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this is a federal agency, so while it's not Maryland specific, they still have a lot of great resources. And mortgage and housing assistance, student loans, tips on avoiding scams, how to manage your finances, and some information about mortgage, forbearance, and specific information maybe for older adults or service members. You can also go to the U.S. Department of Education. So if you're a student loan borrower and you want more information about some of the student loan protections, you can go to the U.S. Department of Education Office of Federal Student Aid, studentaid.gov, and there's all the coronavirus information and forbearance info. They keep this up to date, so it's got the newest information about some of the forbearance options, collections, some FAQs, and they get a little bit more specific than I have in this presentation. So if you need more information about anything that I covered, the websites that I just showed you and our financial relief guide, which also links to more resources, should have the information to answer your questions. And finally, This is our website. That is our general phone number, 410-230-6100. If you have a complaint, you can email it. If you have a complaint about one of the businesses that I talked about, you can email it to the that email address there. For student loan questions, studentloan.ombudsman@maryland.gov. And I forgot to, while I was over in our office's website. Okay, so if you have a complaint, you simply go to our website, and then on the home page, you'll see in bold, it says file a complaint or report fraud, and it takes you to information about how to file a complaint about each of the different entities that we regulate. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, and we're just under the 45-minute mark. So I will pause there and see if there's anything Sue wants to add or ask about.
Yeah, Meredith, thank you so much for all this great information. This is really helpful. We've had one question from a participant asking about the student loan assistance from the federal government, and really trying to find out or understand why that assistance only applies to loans that are through the Department of Education, so not private loans. So do you have any comments as to why that is? I think part of it is that that's what the federal government can control, that they're willing to give up their interest that would have been accruing during this time that they've suspended payments, but maybe they can't control private business. But do you have any thoughts on that question?
Exactly. I think you summed it up pretty well. So, and this also applies to the mortgage, like the assistance provided in the CARES Act. That's why it is only the federally backed loans, either Fannie or Freddie, which are government supervised entities, FHA, VA, and the U.S. Department of Education. So these are all loans that are either owned or backed by the federal government, which means they have they have ultimate authority into the repayment and any sort of relief options they want to offer.
Great, thank you. And then can I just clarify or make sure that I'm understanding correctly with foreclosures currently in Maryland?
Sure.
That no new foreclosure proceedings can be brought to the courts due to Governor Hogan's executive order, but ones that were in proceedings before the emergency order was given out can proceed. Do I have that right?
Basically, it can be a little bit confusing. So the foreclosure process is long, and there are many different stages in that foreclosure process. So the first stage means that is the notice stage. So the lender, as soon as the borrower falls behind, the lender will send them a notice in the mail. It's a notice of intent. And it will say, if you don't contact us or otherwise catch up on your payment, we will start foreclosure action. And that foreclosure action is filed in court. Okay, so any court actions that were started, okay, let me say this differently. That notice of intent, that very first notice, lenders are prohibited from doing that right now. Okay, so if somebody falls behind or somebody has fallen behind since Governor Hogan issued that order in April, the lender can't start that very beginning notice. They can't do that first thing, which means they can't move on to the next thing, which is the court action. But if somebody was already behind and they had already received that notice, or if their foreclosure was already working through the court process, that can now proceed. So it feels like it's a little bit nuanced, but that's the best way I can sum it up, right? So if your foreclosure was already going through the court process, then it can now continue. What can't happen is what's not supposed to happen is you're not supposed to get that initial notice from the lender saying we're starting foreclosure now. That's still on hold.
Okay. Thank you. That is
Do you
very
want to ask any
complicated.
more help? Okay. All right. So I guess my advice to Maryland homeowners then would be that if they receive anything in the mail that says notice of intent to foreclose, and there's a little bit more information if you go to the PDF guide and let's see, under the mortgage and foreclosure section, you click on that executive order, you can read exactly what the governor has said. And some of it may feel a little bit legalese, but let's see. Right, so here we go. Commissioner, so our office was ordered to suspend the operation of the notice of intent to foreclose. So if you get something that says notice of intent to foreclose, please let our office know.
Gotcha. That's helpful. And certainly the Hope Helpline
Great.
is a great resource for anyone that's concerned about foreclosures as well. So thank you again for all the great information. We don't have any other questions. So at this point, we're going to close out the webinar. I, again, appreciate everyone for taking time for their day to join us for the webinar. Really appreciate Meredith sharing all this great information and all the great work you do in your division to protect consumers and to help kind of level the playing field for lenders and consumers. So again, this will be recorded and put on Cash Academy. I hope everyone stays safe and have a great rest of your day.